Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Our Community, Our Health Forum. Lung cancer research and me, everything I wanted to know. We'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us tonight. This town hall is funded by the UF Cancer Center and jointly sponsored by Science and UF, an outreach program of the STEM Translational Communication Center, and HealthStreet, a community engagement program in the Department of Epidemiology, funded by the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. Our goal over the next hour is to provide an opportunity for community members to ask our panel of experts questions about the role of research in advancing the care of patients with lung cancer. Now let's meet our panelists. Dr. Frederick Kay is the medical director of the Thoracic Oncology Program and director of the Lung Cancer Center with UF Health Cancer Center. Giselle Moore-Higgs is a research coordinator with UF Health Cancer Center. And Faya Bainbridge is a small cell lung cancer survivor. What can you tell us about preventive measures that people can take when it comes to lung cancer?
Well, the first important preventive measure is the very marked increased risk factor that tobacco and smoking has on this disease. It was an epidemic through much of this century because smoking rates in the adult population have decreased actually quite dramatically over the past 30 years. Death rates, age-adjusted death rates are actually going down for lung cancer at this time, but there still is a substantial burden. The majority of the patients that we see, we think tobacco is the link, and that's the key prevention. There are new products on the market, some of them ostensibly to help cut down on smoking. The electronic cigarette is one, and there's a lot of ambivalence or uncertainty on the safety of that as a specific tool to use. So we do our best to try to encourage people not to smoke, or if they're smoking, to quit. I want to add one other thing, though. We are seeing a substantial number of patients with lung cancer who are non-smokers, distant smokers or lifelong non-smokers. It's a very timely topic for a large population of the people, and there's concern, is that risk rising, and what might be the the risk underlying that, and that's an area of active study.
Okay. Can we talk about screening? I think many people might be familiar with screening, the protocols or the recommendations for breast cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer. When it comes to lung cancer, what are the guidelines? What should people keep in mind about making sure that they don't have a problem that they're not aware of?
Lung cancer screening is different from the other tools done so far because we know we will identify abnormalities on very sensitive chest CT scans, and what we do as physicians, when we see those, we don't act on them. We repeat the scan over time and make sure it's growing to make sure we only attack those patients we feel quite confident it is an important lung tumor. Getting to your question, who falls into it? It's a moving target right now because we're not sure. It's new, it's early. The broad guidelines are if you're 55 years old to 80 years old, and if you smoked a certain amount, and there's a certain calculation, if you smoked the equivalent of a pack a day for 30 years, you would qualify, the insurance would cover the cost for that. And we think it's an important tool. It's underused right now. So not as many people are taking advantage of lung cancer screening.
And when it comes to lung cancer research, and Gigi, I'd like to bring you into this part of the conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about what a lung cancer research study is and why those are important?
Our clinical research trials are based on trying to find better treatments for lung cancer. So we have several different phases of clinical trials. We have our phase 1 trials where we're trying to see if a new drug can be safely given to patients and find out what doses can be given to patients and without causing a lot of problems. Phase 2 trials, when you have a new drug, then you're trying to determine if it's going to have efficacy or work against a particular tumor type. And usually those are small trials, small groups of 30 to 120 people in general. And then we have our phase 3 trials where we're actually looking to see if that new drug works equally as well or even better than what we're currently doing in standard of care. So for lung cancer trials, many of them are focused on new drugs or immunotherapy, personalized medicine, where we're actually looking to see if we can find a particular abnormality in the tumor that we can target with our drugs.
Okay. And Dr. Kay, why is that? Why is it important that people take part in research studies? Maybe it seems like the answer goes without saying, but I think people might have concerns about being part of a study.
Well, I think for lung cancer in specific, I've been doing basic, laboratory-based research in lung cancer for more than 30 years. And the past 10 years is an incredibly exciting phase for basic science and science behind, what's driving these lung tumors and really new and innovative treatment opportunities. The opportunities for the patients are moving a lot slower, but the background basic research is so exciting right now, and the clinical trials that are coming online now are very tailored and targeted to strong underlying basic science principles. So I think the promise for treatment opportunities has never been greater. And so I think a lot of the excitement of enrolling patients on the trials is how much the doctors themselves feel committed that this is a worthwhile venture, and this is a really exciting period of time.
Mm-hmm. And Faya, you've been through that process. Would you say that it was a worthwhile venture?
Yes, I think that's the reason I'm here today, actually. I was diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. I was told that it's terminal. They gave me 2 weeks to live if I did nothing. If I had chemo treatment, I would have about a year to live. And then they gave me the option of a study, and I participated in that, and I was in it for 1 year. And I think it has a lot to do with why I'm here.
And so you would recommend to a friend, say, who had the opportunity to go through something similar, you would say, I think you should think about it and consider it.
I would.
Okay.
And even at the time when I was diagnosed, I felt as though if I participated, the doctors could better understand the disease, and or it might help somebody in the future. Maybe not me. In my case, I think it helped me.
Gigi, let me ask you, who conducts research studies? Would a regular doctor, if I'm a patient, would my doctor be allowed to be part of that process and be included in treatment discussions and the research discussions?
Most private practice physicians do not conduct clinical trials in their offices. It takes a huge team of individuals to properly conduct a clinical trial, because the amount of very close supervision to the regulatory side of things as well as to the actual patient care. So most clinical research is conducted in larger academic institutions or large outpatient practices. And the clinical research usually is done in a team of individuals. So the physician is the principal investigator. You have study coordinators like myself. You have data managers who are responsible for collecting important data. And then you often have the team of nurses and physicians in the clinic providing input into the day-to-day management of the patient.
Okay. And what kinds of patients would be involved in a research study? Are they only open to patients with certain types of cancer, certain stages of cancer? How are those decisions made?
There are lots of different types of clinical trials. In cancer, we can have clinical trials that are sponsored by specific pharmaceutical companies. Some clinical trials are sponsored by investigators who develop the trials themselves. And then we have national cooperative grouped studies. So we can't, each academic site doesn't open every single clinical trial. But what we try to do is offer what we think are the most important clinical trials for a particular disease. And so when a patient is potentially eligible for the trial, we'll be looking at the type of cancer that they have, the size of the tumor, has it spread to other places, how healthy is the individual, how committed are they to coming to make the appointments that are necessary for the study. So there's a lot of information that goes into it. As we get more into personalized medicine, where we're trying to find a particular marker on a particular individual's tumor, the number of trials goes down that our patients are eligible for, just because we're trying to target a particular type of disease, marker.
What are the kinds of questions maybe that they should be asking?
Well, first of all, to be as educated as possible under the circumstance. A lot of patients are overwhelmed with the diagnosis. It's hard for a patient to go through this by themselves, no matter how educated they are or not. They need a group of family or friends to be there to listen to the information, to try to, or tape the conversation to hear it again. As they go through the different options of treatment, because there usually are choices as to how to move forward, from no treatment or limited treatment to standard treatments to a research trial. Philosophically, if there is uncertainty as to how best to attack this, I'm always in favor of a research clinical trial. A lot of these new therapies are incredibly exciting, and I find circumstances where patients can only get access to these drugs through a clinical trial, and we have to sort of negotiate the eligibility criteria. So there's a lot of decision making to be done. It can be very overwhelming, and we just do the best we can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you recommended that some of those conversations be recorded. We all know we have terrible recall, especially in stressful situations. And Faya, you've walked through this. What would you recommend? And we will be talking a lot more about your story tonight too, but what would you recommend as far as for a patient who's going to be having these conversations? What are some of the things that you learned along the way that might be helpful to other patients?
I think it would be very good to have family members or someone that's in the know. I have a cousin that is in the medical field, and I had her present also when I was diagnosed, so that she could help me to understand what I was facing.
Okay.
And I think that's real important.
Good, that's great advice as well. We do have a live tweet question that has come in to us. So let's see what's on the minds of folks who were watching and listening. And am I allowed to change my mind if I decide that I don't want to be in a study any longer?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Yes,
so that's what you were told. Gigi, is that what you tell people
Yes,
when they ask?
Every patient who enrolls on a clinical trial does have the option at any point during the trial, whether it's the day after they sign their consent or if it's a week before the end of their treatment. If they say, enough, I want to stop the protocol and want to get off, they come off the study.
And what would be an example of a doctor changing his or her mind? Why might you change your mind?
Yeah, we do our best reading into the future. We don't have perfect treatments, and we're very aware of that, whether it's our standard treatments or on research therapy. And so we are weighing as best we can, risks and benefits. Every patient's a little different, and we watch through every cycle of treatment and make our estimates, what's best for the patient as we're going forward. So I don't feel like I'm locked into, treatments necessarily. We're looking to be, even though we're rigid within the clinical trials, and there's a lot of evidence-based medicine that is somewhat rigid, but we also try to be creative, at the same time, and try to see what we think is best moving forward.
And when it comes to clinical trials or research studies, we know that minorities are underrepresented. Do you have any idea why that might be?
I think a lot of it is cultural. There's very definitely there has been a lot of research looking at this very specific issue, and there are cultural differences. Many people are concerned that they're being treated as a guinea pig, that research is, a sign that people just want to try something on you, and there isn't really a lot of thought behind what's happening. And we, as scientists and as research nurses and coordinators, really need to do a better job of explaining the process of research to families and to the patients. There's a lot of misunderstanding and information that's out there, not just about research, but about cancer and its treatment as a whole. And so education is a critical piece of what we do every day.
I would like to say that I
Yes.
had great care, and I was monitored very closely, and it was just as close as you could get, I guess. And it seems like they wanted to know every little thing about me, while I was on the trial.
And let me ask you this, let's circle back to your story. Can you tell us a little bit about when you were diagnosed and how that process unfolded for you? What was that like?
Well, I was a long-term smoker, and about 3 months prior to my diagnosis, I started losing a little bit of weight. About a month before, I got a cough, and I kind of lost my voice. And then at the end of that month, I had severe chest pain. I went to the ER, and it was full on. By the time I was diagnosed, it was too late, as they told me.
Okay.
And the symptoms did not occur in time. It was very short.
And so your treatment started with what? What were the decisions that had to be made from that time that you found out that it was too late, so to speak?
Right. When I found out, I was severely ill, and I had 2 weeks to live. The cancer, I had a tumor the size of an orange in my chest, and it had gone into my liver, some spots in my liver. And when you have a choice of you're going to die in 2 weeks, or you can have chemotherapy and live possibly a year, it is a terminal disease. So I was looking at the end quick or in about a year.
So how did you make the decisions about your treatment? What happened from there? You had conversations with...
Yes, I had my husband saying, chemo, 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 of course. And I wanted to know what kind of quality of life I would have for that year. That was important for me. And they told me it would be an okay year. And I accepted that. With the clinical trial coming along, that was just to help other people. But I'm here today. This is 3 years. I'm into it, 3 years.
And you were told 2 weeks.
Yes.
And along the way, you also had your divine physician, and you had Dr. K.
And Dr. K
as
actually
well.
is my
He was part of the
doctor.
process, we'd
He
like
is
to
my
mention.
doctor.
So
And he's excellent, and the care that I had has been excellent. All my whole journey through has been excellent.
that's wonderful. Faya, did you keep a journal and other records to help you keep up with all of the information through the process of the study?
I did sort of keep a journal. It was more everything I ate, everything that I did during the day, and I ate a lot of fruit bars. And I had consumed a lot of grapefruit.
Oh, okay.
As I look back on all of that.
Now, we're going to change gears a bit right here. We've heard the panel talk about some of the issues that people may face when making a decision about their care. But how does that play out in real life? The U.S. Center for Arts in Medicine has prepared a brief performance showing what these conversations sometimes look like.
I'm sorry to hear that, Gina. You're going to get through this. I know it. Now, tell me what the doctor told you.
He told me that even though the last round of chemo wasn't effective, there's a research study that would be a good fit for me at this stage of my cancer.
Well, that sounds promising.
I don't know. It's a lot of information to understand.
Well, let me take a look. Okay. Well, it says right here that the study will last for 3 years and that you'll be monitored and screened regularly for any abnormalities.
Would I have to go into the hospital more than I do now?
I don't think so. It depends on what group you'll be in, and it looks to me like they're going to divide the study into 3 groups. One's going to get the new drug in pill form and take it with meals every day. The second group will get a slightly stronger dose of the new drug and take it with meals every day. And the third group will get the standard chemotherapy treatment.
How do I know what group I'll be in?
I don't think you will know until you're enrolled in the study and assigned a group.
But if I got into the group with the new drug, I'd know that?
It says it's an open label study, so I believe so, yes.
And if I take the new drug every day by pill, I'd actually have to go into the hospital less?
Perhaps. It says right here that they're going to monitor you closely for any adverse effects and that they're going to draw blood every 3 weeks.
Do you think it's safe?
I can't tell you that, Gina. I can only tell you what it says here.
But what if I don't want to be a part of the study anymore? Do you think they're going to make me stay in it?
No, it says right here that you have the right to opt out anytime you want to.
Really?
Yes, and I'm also seeing a lot of exclusion criteria. Did your doctor tell you that you qualify?
Yes, he said I can do it if I want to.
Well, then what do you think?
Well, it doesn't sound like I have anything to lose. Maybe I'll call and make an appointment and take the next step.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
So obviously Gina had a lot of questions, and she had a friend there to kind of walk her through that process of understanding. How important, Gigi, is the patient's understanding when talking about a research study, considering a research study? Should they put themselves in their doctor's hands and just let them guide the whole process, or is that kind of questioning important for their healing?
I think it's very important for people to understand what the protocol or the treatment is going to be, whether they are getting standard treatment or whether they're going on a research protocol. It helps people wrap their arms around what to expect. They see it, it's put out there, they understand every step, what to expect. If something's a little different, that kind of cues, well, I need to ask a question as to why that's different. I think it falls into the whole part of, being responsible for your health and being an active participant in your health and making those decisions. So we strongly encourage patients to take time to learn about what it is that we have to offer with our clinical trials. We're encouraged to have patients take the consents home with them that provides all the information, allow them to share it with their families, share it with a physician or somebody who may be in the healthcare field that they trust, who can review it with them and go over it with them, and then come back and spend some more time reviewing it with us one more time before they decide.
Okay. And we've already talked a little bit about, and Gigi, you brought this up, the different kinds of research studies, the different levels. Is it always about testing a new drug?
No, there are lots of studies out there that are looking at other types of treatments, such as radiation therapy treatments. That there are things that we do that look at taking care of patients after they've gone through treatment, and looking at how their bodies responded to the treatment that they received. They're called survivorship trials, where we're looking to see how the side effects or the late effects of some of the treatments that they may have received actually have impacting their quality of life. So no, it's not always about a drug.
And we hear about control groups. And Dr. K, does control group mean I will be the patient who doesn't get treatment? When we hear about those in studies, sometimes we think, well, there's the placebo and then there's the investigational medication, and it's one or the other.
There are fewer and fewer studies such as that. But whenever a study is done, it's done because there's uncertainty between the two, and there are risks and benefits. So there is a sense that either arm is just as beneficial in the long run. But there are fewer studies where patients say would not get any treatment at all. I'm not aware of any right now that we're engaged in. There are circumstances where you do get a certain best treatment and then you might be randomized to something additional or not. They're generally built in such a way now that you can cross over and get access to the drug eventually, but they have to understand that this is part of trying to collect data, move the field forward, and I haven't had a circumstance of the patient, withdrawing because of that. But again, your question also about approach, every patient and family I found is different, and how much information they need is different. Sometimes a second opinion or a third opinion is a very good idea, not for all patients or families, and so that's part of the journey you have to go through and see what works best.
Gigi, in the conversation between Gina and Sam that we saw earlier, one of the things that they mentioned was the term open label. Can you give us an idea of what that means?
What open label means is that we actually, as a scientist or the investigator and the nurse and the family, know which arm the patient is on, so they know whether or not they are actually getting the investigational agent and what the dose is. There are some studies that are blinded where nobody knows which drug the patient is getting, and those are a little bit more complicated and often used very early in research, not in our larger studies.
Okay, and very early on in our conversation, you mentioned something else that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned personalized medicine, and that's something that I don't think we heard about a few years ago. What is personalized medicine? What is the focus there compared to what we would think of as standard across the board for everybody medicine?
Well, there's different ways to look at personalized medicine. The way we commonly do this in cancer treatments is trying to identify what is the specific genetic event which is driving this patient's particular cancer. And sometimes there are 4 or 5 core mutational events that drive the cancer, and each of them are treatment opportunities. We just don't have the specific drugs that can reach that part of the cell to take advantage of that for most of them. But we have them for a few of them. So we try to get as broad an understanding of what the molecular events are in a patient's cancer. And if a patient has gene mutation A, we have a drug A that we can pull off the shelf that can be quite effective. If they have gene mutation B, we have a drug B, we have a drug C, but we almost stop there. We don't go as far down the alphabet as we need to. And that's part of the great excitement. You have to match these drugs very precisely with the specific mutation. They seem not to work, or you may have side effects and no benefits if you use them in everyone. It makes for very complicated clinical trials right now. The molecular basis for that immune therapy hasn't been exactly figured out, but it will be. So that's the one side of personalized medicine that we focus on more, but there's others. For instance, how you innately, what you're born with, your inherited ability of how you handle a certain drug, how you handle food, how you handle things can affect how you metabolize things, and that's a whole other field of pharmacology that the pharmacists are trying to tap into. So I could go on and on.
Okay, we will move on now, though, just for time purposes, to information seeking and decision making. So the audience will have some idea of finding information about research studies if they're interested. How can they go about finding information about research studies? Where can they do that, Gigi?
There is a website called clinicaltrials.gov that is run by the federal government, and we have to put every single clinical trial that is open has to be listed in that clinicaltrials.gov list. So you can go to clinicaltrials.gov, you can type in lung cancer, and up will come all the clinical trials that are currently underway that are for lung cancer. You can get more specific if you need to. If you're looking for just the clinical trials that are available in your local area, the University of Florida Shands Cancer Center website has a link that lists all of the clinical trials that we're conducting for lung cancer and all the other types of cancers that are available. And most institutions that are doing clinical research have those types of links to their institution's website that are on their website that list all the trials that are available.
Okay. And we have another Twitter question that has come our way. Someone wants to know, why is research important to public health? Who would like to tackle that one? That's a big question.
I think research is very important because I'm here. I am here, I believe, because of research.
I think research is critically important to public health across the board. If we aren't learning about new opportunities to help patients, not just with diseases that are terminal if we don't treat them, but also diseases that can be chronic and long term, we're not moving forward in medicine and health. For instance, we have seen a dramatic response of cure to children with leukemia because of clinical research. Mm-hmm. 50 years ago, most children died of leukemia within the first year or two. Now we're curing 80% of those children, and they're living long, healthy, good lives. So we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have clinical research out there. So clinical research makes a huge difference to how we treat patients with high blood pressure, patients with diabetes. We're making lots and lots of changes that allow people to live long, healthy lives and are able to be contributors to our society.
And if I do my own research as a patient, I come across the opportunity for a research study, am I allowed to ask to be part of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we recommend, and patients will often come in with 5 or 6 protocols that they found on the internet, and they will ask us about those trials. And if we do have the trial available and they are eligible for that trial, we'll continue to move on in the process of considering them for enrollment. If we don't have the clinical trial available, we have often hooked patients up with another institution that does have a clinical trial, or that particular clinical trial that they may be eligible for, and referred them to that institution to be considered.
All right. And is there any additional cost or any cost to the patient if they do become involved in a research study?
Many of the research studies are sponsored by a pharmaceutical company or the federal government, and so we receive a small pot of money to conduct the research, and that usually pays for the study drug, usually it pays for any specific tests that are being done just for research. But for the most part, the care that you would be getting would be care that you'd be receiving if you weren't on a study, and therefore those charges are sent to your third-party payment payer, your insurance or Medicare, Medicaid.
We're going to change gears a little bit again. The UF Center for Arts and Medicine has prepared another performance that addresses more of the challenges that patients face when they're trying to decide if they want to be part of a research study. Let's take a look.
I remember hearing all these horror stories about studies back in the 60s. These studies were just to make the doctors look good and advance medicine. They don't give a damn about us.
Oh, come on, Mike. Medicine has come a long way since then. And a lot has been done to protect patients since those terrible things happened. In the 70s, there was a national commission, and the government stepped in to regulate these issues.
What does the government know about medicine?
Probably not much. But they listened to the experts and set up national review boards which rigorously monitor this issue.
How do you know all this?
I read about it all online. I want to know all about this so that I can help you with your decision.
Well, all this doesn't mean that the drugs they want to give me won't kill me.
But it does mean that the people who are running the study have deemed it as valuable, and they have gone through a lot of regulation to get to this point. If you decide to sign up for a study like this, they agree to take care of you, to monitor you, and to answer any questions you might have. And you're not going into this blind, Mike. You have to understand it completely and consent before you can participate.
What exactly does that mean?
It means you make an appointment with your oncologist, and she goes through every detail of the study with you. She outlines all the risks and the benefits, what you can expect to happen, and you can ask any questions that you might have.
Will you go with me?
Of course I'll go with you, sweetheart. Look, if your cancer had responded to this last chemo, we wouldn't even be talking about this. I think that the least we can do is consider something different. I know you don't like doctors much, but maybe if you read a little more about this, you might feel differently.
Well, point taken. So, you're the expert now, huh?
Maybe.
Well, expert, I'll be your student now.
Wonderful. I'll print out some things that you can read later on. You want some coffee?
You making some?
Coming right up.
And probably not an uncommon level of concern there when considering a research study. Are there, I would assume that most patients would probably wonder about protections that might be in place. Are there standard baseline protections that we have some reassurance as patients that it's going to be, you'll be protected?
Well, I think the first thing, for some of the trials that we do, and the early stage trials, phase 1 trials, there's no assurance that the treatment is going to be beneficial to the patient. So to some extent, going on a research trial is a form of altruism, a form of wanting to contribute to moving the field forward.
It was important to me that the doctors better understand the disease and if it could help people in the future.
So not necessarily every patient in every case gets helped himself or herself, but there was another reason for you deciding to be part of that.
Right. I thought that my time was limited, and any research that I participated in, the study would be for other people in the future.
The other thing I tell patients, and Gigi I'm sure would agree with that, is I don't have any certainty that this is going to be helping at all, but a side benefit of going on the research trial, besides having me and or my nurse, there's this whole clinical trials infrastructure that's watching out for you. Mm-hmm. And we have another set of nurses, another set of ears, like another navigator or coordinator. And it's like another security blanket that I think, adds benefit to the patient. So it's an unexpected, benefit just to, consider. And
we're very careful. Patients receive a very lengthy informed consent that explains absolutely every step of what the clinical trial will do, so that they'll know what the information is that we already know about the study drug, what would be done if they didn't go on the study, information about the potential side effects that we already know that come from this particular drug, all the steps of what will be done to them. So there's a lot of protection provided within that informed consent, and they get a copy of that after they've signed it, so that they will always have that information with them. It's not just that we're explaining it to you, but we're also providing you with a copy of the informed consent. Many of the studies actually have additional brochures that further explain it. So there's lots of information. And the studies involve a lot of testing, a lot of us constantly checking for side effects and late effects, for problems, so that there's lots of opportunity for us to make sure that the patient doesn't get hurt.
From what I remember,
Yeah.
I was given this consent throughout.
Right.
Periodically,
Right.
I would get the consent and re-sign it and re-go over everything.
Right.
Okay. Okay. We did have one Twitter question come in that I think to some degree you have already answered, but I wanted to touch on this one. If a new drug or treatment is being tested, does that mean that the doctors don't know what it's going to happen to the don't know what will happen to the patient when that treatment is used?
I think it varies. It depends how much science is underpinning this new drug. So the answer to that question is yes, we often don't know, but sometimes there's much more excitement behind it because we've seen what it does in the laboratory, we've seen what it does in animal experiments, and I think the science is better now than it was 10 years ago, and we can predict better benefit for patients. So there's still surprises, but
I think each patient is different too. You know, for me personally, I have a very positive attitude, and Dr. K knows that I was a long-term smoker, and he would ask me periodically, "Are you smoking?" And I would assure him, "No, I'm not," because then the research would be pointless. So I tried personally to do everything I possibly could do to help in any way. And like he says, not really for me. I didn't expect to be sitting here today. I was really trying to help somebody else.
Right. Well, you were a very good patient. Along the same line, there was another question from a Twitterer. What happens if I'm in a study and I react badly to a study drug or treatment? And Gigi, I think you probably let people know along the way. We don't always know with every patient exactly what's going to happen.
That's something that the team would then evaluate whether or not we need to leave the patient on the study or not. Is it just something that might be, a short term, a rash that shows up that's itchy that's going to go away in 24 hours or 48 hours? Or is this a very serious side effect where the patient's having difficulty breathing and we obviously have a much more serious problem? So it depends a little bit on what the side effect is, but it also depends on if it's something that we expect will resolve, or is this something more serious, in which case maybe we do need to take the patient off the study drug.
Okay. And Feya, as you went through this whole process, talk to us a little bit about that experience as far as what went through your mind when you were asked to be part of a research study. Did you have concerns about how you might react?
I really didn't, because I was given no option other than I was going to die soon or die in a year for me. And so the choice to participate in a study could only help someone. And, so I didn't see where it could hurt me in any way. Mm-hmm. And if anything came up, of course, you can stop the study. You don't have to participate,
So you were well aware.
I was well aware.
All through the process.
All through the process and continuing through the process. And the study nurse was always concerned about my quality of life as Dr. K. And I felt like I got very, very good care.
Gigi, what might be some of the reasons that a patient would be reluctant to participate in a study? Obviously, Vea had good reasons. She wanted to help other people. She wanted to help herself and felt like this was an opportunity. She saw it as an opportunity. For folks who might see the other side, the flip side of that, what might be the things that make them hesitate?
Fear of the unknown. You know, if this is something that we don't have all the answers to, and so they might feel more comfortable with something that they know lots of people have already received, and they feel comfortable with that. Some patients come into treatment with a sense of wanting to do what they need to do, but they don't want to have a big impact on their life. So this, might entail additional blood draws. It might entail completing quality of life surveys. It might entail some other things that they're just not prepared to do. This is already overwhelming, and that just adds another layer of stress to what is already a stressful time. So I think there's a number of things that are barriers for patients in terms of making that decision.
And what might be the role for HealthStreet in all of this? We have another Twitter question. How do programs like HealthStreet help research? And can HealthStreet help me get connected to studies?
HealthStreet has been wonderful about identifying potential patients in the community who might benefit from research that's being conducted at the University of Florida. So when they're doing some of their clinical settings, some of their clinic settings, or when they're doing screenings for different diseases, they may identify patients who might be eligible for a clinical trial. They also conduct research looking to help us identify how to better approach patients about research, about helping to help patients connect to available research as well as hosting events like tonight, which gets the word out there that we are conducting research and that how to make that happen.
Vea, we haven't talked much about your family and how engaged they were in the process. Was that part of the process for you, and was it important to you?
Yes, very important. I'm a very family person. I have a husband of 37 years. I have 5 children, 6 grandchildren, and in my care, my mother, who was, I think she was 88 at the time that I was diagnosed, she was my caretaker. And I had a PICC line for 4 months. She flushed my PICC line every day. Between her and my husband, they fed me well, and I actually gained almost 50 pounds.
Oh my gosh, that's probably a little bit unusual.
I've always been thin, yeah. It was good for me because I was very underweight when I was diagnosed. So, and right now I'm doing well with my weight. And but my family is very important to me. They always, a member took me to my treatments, and with the clinical trial, the study that I was participating in, I had a day 1 and a day 8. And then I skipped a week, and a day 1 and day 8, and skipped a week. So, and I did that for a year, and I always had family with me, and it was a big support to me. I love them all dearly.
We had another question come in for you. What was your home life like during your study?
Ooh, okay, well, I actually stayed home a lot. If I did go out, I masked and I gloved. I protected myself. Your immune system is compromised, so with chemo, and so I just continued on with that. If people came to see me, they washed, masked, and gloved before they got to come in and see me. So, and then I just tried to continue on my life as best as I could. And now I bicycle, I watch my grandchildren again, I garden, I do basically what I want to do.
And a lot of that, I think, is because, in addition to everything else, she stopped smoking.
Yes.
And I think that has, to other people who smoke for a long period of time, there's a certain amount of harm that you may never recover from, or it takes decades to recover from. But there are a number of immediate benefits, from, cardiac and pulmonary function. So it's always a good idea. And in treating patients with cancer, it's anecdotal, but the patients who still smoke or use electronic cigarettes, they just don't do as well. I have far fewer of them who, do better than expected. So
You need to quit. If you smoke, you need to quit.
Right.
There you go. Faya just told everybody.
I'm curious about stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Can one start a trial in stage 2 and skip stage 1, or?
The phases of clinical
Right, yeah.
trials
Right.
are
Right.
very dependent on the stage of your disease. So most phase 1 studies are for
Right.
patients who have failed all other treatment and are wanting to try at least maybe a new drug that is just early in us learning about it, and want to find out if they can go on it. And we learn a lot about that. That's when we find out what kinds of side effects, et cetera, that they're having. Patients who are usually early diagnosis or diagnosed up front, we usually have phase 2 or phase 3 studies for those folks. So it's usually the phase 1 studies are usually for patients who have relapsed tumors and have tried all the things that are conventional and may have been on other types of clinical trials and failed. And this may be the only drug that we have in our research arena that might benefit them.
Right. The phase 3, okay, now the phase 3, not stage 2. The phase 3 are the most complicated. That's the randomized trial that we're talking about. That's like the last, getting at the end stage, and a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, they're required to do that right now if they want to get FDA approval. So the FDA is requiring showing efficacy in a randomized process. In some circumstances, it's complicated because the drug might be for a specific small subset. And if you study it on a large group, you might miss an important benefit that's for only a few patients, and it might be diluted out by the group. And I think that's, again, an example where I don't think we haven't figured out how best to wrap our arms around that. And the FDA is well aware of that and may be loosening how they're going to go ahead and approve drugs or try to get large multi-center studies so we can find these small groups of patients, because it takes a long time then if it's a small subset that has just gene mutation A, for instance. Might be only 2-3% of lung cancer. How do you capture and accrue enough of them? And so this is a big issue right now in trying to do things as quickly as possible and yet fall into the constraints of the FDA requirement for these phase 2 trials that often require large numbers of patients for their statistics. And it's complicated.
All right, did we have any other audience? We have one more question from the audience. Hello.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I have a question for Faya. In the general population of people, a majority of people have a negative connotation about medicine in general. They tend to think of it, doctors, and they're kind of on their pedestal. They don't really have like emotion, like personal warm feelings when they think about it. And a lot of times with medicine, it is associated with bad news and treatments and things. So my question for you for going through the clinical trial, and you were sort of given a prognosis of, well, maybe you have this much amount of time left. For people who would be thinking about participating in a clinical trial, how much of your time that you had left do you think was dictated or regulated by all of the things you had to do for the clinical trial? Like, did you feel like that sort of ran your life, or was that sort of a subset and then you were still able to enjoy the time you had left?
I thought it was very important to participate in the trial first off, and I wanted to be as much involved with my family as possible, and I didn't want to be surrounded with negativity. I wanted people to be positive. In other words, I didn't want people saying, oh, terrible, and all of that. I wanted the positive. So I surrounded myself with positive people, and I limited who knew about it right off the bat. I come from a small town, and I didn't let the news go out, and just my family members knew about it, and I tried to involve with my family, but I had to protect myself at the same time.
So do you,
But that's, I was going to say, that's a good question, because forgetting about a clinical trial, when you approach any patient with advanced disease, you try to look through the crystal ball as best you can, and you try to get information from the patient, the family. What trips do they have? What important events do they have coming up? Not to jeopardize those type of events, and you just do the best you can, I suppose.
My granddaughter had a band concert, and I went in gloves, mask, gown, and I went anyway.
Good for you, and thank you for joining us tonight.